to try to suggest the contours of a somewhat different narrative. First, I think working people are still the core constituents of a Democratic Party majority. It's not the old working class, or not just the old working class, however, but the new. Service workers, the new technical crafts, the deprofessionalized professionals. It's still true today, just as it was a century ago, that the majority of the labor force are waged and or low-income salaried workers. But secondly, it's not just numbers that matter, but political ideology. Here's where I think closer attention to and appreciation of the post-60s liberalism of working people as a whole, organized and unorganized, can contribute to a more accurate narrative of the post-60s transformation of the Democratic Party, and hence to a fuller understanding of its current political possibilities. Many scholars and popular commentators now put the defection of the white working class at the center of their story of the weakening of the Democratic Party. I'll just conclude by raising some problems with this emphasis on working class conservatism and its preeminent role in the electoral losses of the Democratic Party. Three brief points here. For one, it flies in the face of voting data. I was amazed actually by the historical charts and tables that were published by the Times after the 2004 election. Basically, if only those making below 50,000 had voted, which is some 45% of the population, we would have been spared the debacle of the last 8 years. Indeed, if you look historically, we would have had a long and solidly Democratic reign since the New Deal, with the possible exception of Eisenhower. But what about the white working class? Haven't they abandoned the Democratic Party in droves, starting with the post-68 racist backlash that culminated in the making of the Reagan Democrats in 1980? Here, the voting data analysis of political scientist Larry Bartels, I think, is illuminating. Bartels finds that, yes, working class whites in the South left the Democratic Party after 1968, once the party lost its Jim Crow monopoly hold on that region. But perhaps they were Republicans in Democratic clothing all along. Outside the South, the loss of white working class voters was insignificant. He estimates a decline of 1% since the 50s. 2 minutes, Michael says. Okay. Here's his conclusion. Quote, Republican gains since the 50s have come entirely from the middle and upper income voters. And where losses have occurred, it is attributable to the shift of white voters of all classes in the once solid South. Income, it turns out, is now the best predictor of voting behavior, with lower income voters solidly Democratic, middle income mixed, and higher income solidly in the Republican camp. A second point, when asked about their political identification, the majority of Americans, not just those voting, say moderate, as close as one can get to the L word without actually using it. This suggests that increased voting registration and expanding the ranks of the politically disenfranchised is one way of improving the chances of the Democratic Party, but it also suggests, as other voting data have been citing, that the real question is not why Americans have moved to the right, but why our parties have. What's going on with the party system that it seems to reflect so little of public opinion? Is it that we have a crisis of democratic representation, not a crisis of working class character? In other words, it's our institutions that need fixing, not our people. Third and last, there's the underanalyzed gender angle to the story of working class defection. Women, it turned out, voted in similar ways to men until 1980. A gender gap emerges in 1980 and it has persisted. Something happened in the 70s that might have affected the gender order. But right now it's escaping me. However, we explain it, men left the Democratic Party in the 70s, and women never. The question posed for this session, does liberalism have a usable past? Oddly enough, the Democratic Party seems to think so. The liberal ideals of freedom, equality, democracy are threaded throughout their rhetoric. It is time, I think, the Democratic Party not only reclaimed and reasserted these liberal ideas, but took a page from labor liberalism and engaged in a debate over what these ideals actually mean and how they can best be achieved. That would require, as labor liberals knew, making a case for how real freedom, real equality, and real democracy rest on guarantees of social and economic rights, the return of human rights over market rights, and the democratization of capital as well as the state. That's the legacy of labor liberalism, and I believe it's a usable past that can help the Democratic Party turn its liberal social majority into a political one. Thank you.